Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we've got about 3 weeks left to save this team via the trade market here in the 2026 season. It's July 11th. We're sitting at 44 and 44. So a 500 record, 7.5 back in the AL West. And we are 3 games out in the race for a wild card here. Just made a couple of trades that we talked about in our last episode, and also got through the 2026 draft. So it's going to be a relatively quick episode today, I believe. Really just going to sim the next 3 weeks, get close to the trade deadline, and then past the trade deadline. I'm investigating some interesting things. I've got a trade offer out right now that I'm waiting to hear back from that would bring one of the big guns on the trade market, or on the trade block, more accurately, onto our team without potentially giving up anyone who's a big part of our future. And then I'm also considering trading away a few players. Mentioned this in the comments to the last episode, where we got some helpful suggestions on players to think about moving on from. One additional player that I am exploring potentially trading is Cruz, who's been our starting third baseman for the last season and a half. And he's done a solid job for us this year with a 106 WRC plus and a 2.1 WAR. The issue is he's set to be making about $7 million in arbitration this upcoming year. As much as I like him, I don't know that this A's team can afford to have likely over 10% of its payroll in a guy who's a little bit above average offensively. Not going to give him away, but if there is an opportunity to add someone interesting for him, I think it is something that we would consider over these next few weeks. Fortunately, we do have some depth in AAA. We signed some pretty respectable infielders who were free agents in March to minor league contracts, and have a couple guys who could help us at the major league level stashed in AAA right now. Are they as good as Cruz? Probably not. But if we can get an interesting return for him, it's definitely something we're going to investigate. And before we can even move forward a day, Ian Hamilton diagnosed with elbow inflammation, going to be out 3 to 4 weeks. He's having a solid year for us, second straight solid year for us as our closer. Certainly losing him for the next month is not the way we wrote things up. We did just make that trade for Robert Stevenson, one of the 2 trades that I was talking about, so he will likely be playing an even more prominent role in our bullpen for the next few weeks. And we've heard back from the Yankees on the trade that I had teased earlier. The guy we're trying to bring on board is Jesus Luzardo. Solid starting pitcher, left-hander in the final year of his contract. He's going to be a free agent. There's certainly no way that we'll be able to bring him on board. So he's a rental. He's also a locally popular player, so it might give us a boost now and then hurt us when he leaves. But certainly think he would be one of the best pitchers on our team. He's 9-6 this year with a 3.73 ERA. Over the course of his major league career, he's been pretty much a league average pitcher. Would be a homecoming for him to come back to Oakland, even if only for a couple of months. And we don't have to give up anything too substantial to bring him on board. Gavin Lux and Keston Hiura, who are a couple of those veterans that we signed to minor league free agent contracts. Minor league pitcher Eduardo Rivera, who's not a big-time prospect. He's doing fine this year in high A ball, but 23 years old, and it looks like his control is always going to be a problem. We do have to give up Tommy Edman, who's on our major league roster. He hasn't had a great year for us this season, but that still will potentially make it a little more difficult if we decide we might want to trade away O'Neill Cruz to also have to give up Edman. And then we have to add in another player. They're looking for some of the better prospects in our system, but they're also looking for some guys that are just kind of filler. I think we would be inclined to send them minor league third baseman Ray Garrett, who doesn't look like he's going to be a big-time player for us. I don't love that we're giving up a guy who's played an important role for us this year with Edman, especially as I mentioned that since we might also be looking to move on from O'Neill Cruz, but we're getting the best player in the deal. We did win yesterday to get over 500 at 45 and 44. It's not a long-term commitment for us, and we're not giving up anyone who's in our long-term plans. So I think it makes sense to bring Luzardo on board. Would love to bring a big bat if that was possible. It just doesn't seem like there are any big-time bats out there. So even though we're the Oakland A's, we're going to rent Jesus Luzardo for the last 2.5 months of the season and see if maybe we can sneak our way to a winning record and, who knows, maybe even sneak our way into a wild card spot. And with Luzardo now on board, we had to demote J.P. Sears into the bullpen. A bit of a harsh result for Sears, who's 8-3 with a 3.49 ERA for us this year. But certainly think with Schmidt, Miller, Luzardo, Giolito, and Luis Garcia, we've got a pretty solid rotation. Whether we're going to hit enough to continue winning more games than we're losing, who knows? But given that we didn't have to give up anything that was in our long-term plans for Luzardo anyways, I think it makes sense to bring him on board. And with the opening on our roster by trading away Mr. Edman, we're going to promote Shea Langoliers back. We've had him playing first base and left field down there in AAA this year just to make him as diverse as possible. But he's really a natural catcher. He's hit only 246 this year, but he does have 28 homers and 65 ribbies in AAA, 115 WRC plus. Langoliers is set to be making over $4 million next year, so we kind of got to give him one last chance to see if he can handle major league pitching effectively. He'll kind of be an insurance catcher for us behind McGuire and Stevenson, although if we're able to get really creative, it's possible that McGuire may not be with us for the long term. We're scouting out some people to perhaps make some more interesting trades, and McGuire's roster spot could definitely be in jeopardy given that he's been pretty deficient in his offense this year with a 50 WRC plus for us. And we've simmed a week ahead to the All-Star break, and despite the 3 trades we just made, it was a rough week for us. Ended up losing 5 in a row during the week, 6 in a row overall, before finally beating Toronto in our final game before the Midsummer Classic. So we stand here now at 46-50. Makes me feel a little happier that we didn't give away anything too material to bring Luzardo on board. Slipped back to 5.5 out of the final wild card spot, 11.5 out of the division. As we sit here on July 20th, Estuary Ruiz, second in the league in steals, and he's our only player on the leaderboard. Taking a look at the All-Star game rosters, J.P. Sears, who we talked about, we just demoted him to the bullpen, named an all-star for us this year. And not surprisingly, Sears is our only All-Star this year for the Oakland A's. So hopefully we'll play better coming out of the All-Star break, but definitely not a great situation to have lost 6 in a row right after the draft and right after we made those 3 trades that we thought could potentially help push this team forward. We are going to bring Lawrence Butler back now. He was on a rehab assignment, should be more than ready to go despite hitting just 222 in Las Vegas. And hopefully he'll be able to help us jumpstart our offense post the All-Star break. And we're about to make the trade that I've been talking about. We are going to give O'Neal Cruz away. I mentioned I don't know that we're ready to spend $7 million next year on a guy who is a bit above league average offensively, but not a great third baseman by any means. And we also have to include Kyle Muller, starting pitcher who has been in AAA for us this entire year. Was at one point in the beginning of this playthrough in 2024, he was a pretty important member of our rotation, but he's ended up spending all of this year in AAA, as I talked about, set to be making about $2 million next year in arbitration. I don't love giving up either of these guys, but I guess you're not going to love most trades that you can execute on in OOTP. We're going to get the catcher Drake Baldwin in return. Left-handed hitting catcher, 25 years old. Pretty solid defensively, although he doesn't have the greatest arm in the world. But he's got a decent left-handed bat, and he's just never really gotten a fair shake anywhere. He's been an above-average offensive player, over 198 major league at-bats these past 3 years. But he spent time with Atlanta, the Rangers, and Detroit. So we are going to be his 4th major league team in less than 3 full seasons at this point. So he's not a perfect player, but he is an upgrade, I believe, offensively at this point over Reese McGuire, who I enjoy his glove, but with a 54 WRC plus and barely being above replacement level, I'm just not sure if at 31 years old, McGuire is a big part of our future. We had signed him to that contract with the team options, so we weren't thinking we'd necessarily be moving on from him so quickly, but we also thought that he might have an on-base percentage or a slugging percentage that were above 300, and neither of those is at this point. And we don't really need him if we bring if I could find what I'm looking for on the initiate trade page. If we bring young Mr. Baldwin on board, he'll still be making the major league minimum next season. Might start to get a little bit pricey after that. He's probably a guy we'll try to look to maybe lock up a little quickly, because I think he would be probably the best combination of a decent bat and a decent glove that we have among any catchers in our organization right now. So I think he's someone we'd like to kind of have as our starting catcher against right-handed pitching going forward. Probably given up too much, including O'Neal Cruz in the deal. I did shop O'Neal Cruz separately just to see what we could get for him. There probably was a player or two that most of you would think was better than Baldwin, but they weren't really at positions of need, or they were guys who are already making a little more money. So I think that Baldwin is probably the right way for us to go. So we are going to go ahead, complete the trade, bring Mr. Baldwin on board and see if maybe we can get something, anything, in return at this point for Mr. McGuire, who not that long ago was pretty important to us, and now not so much. And we have traded Reese McGuire away. Not a huge return. Minor league center fielder Simon Muzziotti. Don't really view him as a big-time player. He's 27 years old. He does have 56 days of major league service. Has some speed. He's solid defensively, just not really much of a hitter. Does have some positive personality traits, and he still has 2 option years left, though. So he's someone who hopefully will strengthen our farm system. And moving on from Mr. McGuire, will open up a spot for us to promote Baldwin to the major league team. And those of you who have been following closely know that having Reese McGuire on our team this season was important because of that captain personality that we had. But as you might expect, given my focus on personalities, we had a plan. We have been playing Gio Urshela with a captain personality as our third baseman against left-handed pitching. And with the fact that with these trades, particularly including the pitcher, what trade are we looking at right now? We've made so many trades here. But when we included the pitcher off of our minor league team who was on our 40-man roster, that... yeah, right here, Kyle Muller. I don't know why that was so difficult for me to think of his name. But that opened up a spot on our 40-man roster. We actually ultimately opened up another spot when we traded McGuire away. But with that move, we promoted Kevin Biggio, and he's going to be our third baseman against right-handed pitching. And he also has a captain personality. So although we've got 2 different guys on the major league team with a captain personality now, and they're both in platoon situations, they're going to be platooning with one another to hopefully ensure that we've got some good leadership on the field at all times. So very different looking team right now. We've made the trade for Baldwin, brought Langoliers back from the minors, promoted Biggio, made the trade for Sean Bouchard, and then got Lawrence Butler off of the IL. So a lot going on with the roster here. Hopefully it will mean that we're a better team going forward than we have been thus far this season. And unfortunately, we've lost our first game coming out of the All-Star break to the White Sox, and closer Ian Hamilton just suffered a setback. Going to be gone for at least another 2 weeks. I think if we do anything else, it's likely to be another arm for the bullpen, just because those are generally players that can be added without mortgaging the future, as long as we don't necessarily try to go for the very top end of the closer market. And we did take our second and third games against the White Sox to at least salvage that series, 2 out of 3. So we've got 4 at home against the Angels before heading on the road against Seattle this Friday in the final game of the month before we get to the trade deadline. So 48-51 and 5 games left until the opportunity to improve this roster via the trade market is gone for another season. And we won the first game of the series against the Angels to get to 49-51. Starting to see a lot of offers for Mason Miller, since he is still on the trade block for us. Nothing that's very exciting, though. The most interesting was left fielder Daniel Jaramillo, 18-year-old in the Rays organization. but certainly not a high-end enough prospect that I'd trade Miller for him. The Orioles also offered us 22-year-old pitcher in high A ball, Luis Rodriguez. Not particularly interesting to me. And then the Giants offered us Foeke Dennekamp, a 19-year-old second baseman who doesn't really look like a particularly big-time prospect either. So Miller is attracting some interest, 3-1 with a 3.13 ERA, 27 Ks and 23 innings pitched since he came back to the team from that injury that had him out for almost a year and a half. So far, the offers that we're getting don't make me inclined to move on from Mr. Miller quite yet. And the Jesus Luzardo experiment, which was our big acquisition, not going well, just got suspended for 6 games by the commissioner, and he is 0-2 with a 6.35 ERA since we brought him on board. And we did end up taking 3 out of 4 from the Angels, so we are 5-2 since the All-Star break, record 51-52 as we get ready for trade deadline day with a game against Seattle. Taking a look at the standings, 11.5 back in the division, and we're 4.5 back in the wild card race, but only 3 teams that we'd have to get by to get into that wild card spot. So some of the other teams have not been playing as well recently, so we're at least moving past some of the other very marginal contenders here. But Seattle is one of those teams that is ahead of us for that final wild card berth, so certainly would love to get a W today. But before we play that game, we're going to investigate whether there is anything else we can possibly do to help this team in the trade market. And we have found a trade target, Heimer Candelario, third baseman with the Angels. Switch hitter who's much better against right-handed pitching than he is against left-handed pitching. Just talked about how we brought up Cavan Biggio to play third base for us, and it would give us a captain at third base against both righties and lefties. But Candelario is certainly a better hitter against right-handed pitching than Biggio is at this point. Making a lot of money. He's got an $18 million team option for next year that we certainly would not exercise. Fortunately, there's no buyout on it. So he's a pure rental, but fortunately for us, the price for him is a pure rental, even if we're getting them to potentially keep a pretty big chunk of his contract is not prohibitive, and there's definitely players we'd be willing to give up for him. So I think we're going to bring him on board. It may mean that we're not going to have a captain in the starting lineup every day, but Candelario is clearly a better player at this point than Mr. Biggio. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to think about. And we can basically get Candelario as a rental for free if we just send German Marquez. So we are certainly going to do that. Seems like they just want to get him off of their team. I don't really understand why, but I'm not going to complain. So we're going to go ahead and complete that trade. And that will likely end up meaning that we are going to need to waive and DFA Biggio, because I don't think we can just send him down to AAA. Yeah, he refuses to be demoted, so we will waive and DFA him. If you were wondering, Biggio was 1 for 10. Admittedly, a very tiny sample size, but with that minus 18 WRC plus, that convinced us that maybe bringing Candelario on board would provide a nice little boost for our offense over these last couple months of the season. And we've got another trade that we're going to make here on deadline day, picking up the reliever Kevin Ginkel from the Rays, 32-year-old, final year of his contract, so he's going to be a free agent. He's been good with Tampa Bay this year with a 2.86 ERA for them. Also was very well with Tampa last year after they picked him up in a trade from Arizona. Over the course of his career, he's been an above-average major league pitcher, lefty arm out of the bullpen, who will allow us to send Ken Waldichuk back down to AAA. Certainly be an upgrade as far as a lefty in our pen, bringing Ginkel on board. Not a real high price. We have to send Cruz, who we picked up in a trade with Detroit last offseason. He had been respectable for us at AAA, a pretty versatile player, but 28 years old, does still have 2 option years left, but we've got enough young infielders at this point that I don't think Cruz is a big part of our future. So I don't mind giving him up. We're going to go ahead and make that trade for another reliever. As I said, when we look at our pitching staff, that'll allow us to send Waldichuk down to AAA. I know it's also been mentioned Waldichuk was one of the players that people suggested we try to just trade away. I agree that if we could get something interesting for Waldichuk, I would. Right now, there's just bad Kybert Ruiz contract in return, and then a couple of veterans in Matt Strahm and Austin Allen that aren't all that exciting. So for the time being, since we've got options on Waldichuk, I think we'll just send him down to AAA. And I did quote one thing wrong that I needed to correct. Ginkel is a right-handed pitcher. He's a left-handed batter. But with Allard, J.P. Sears, and Gabe Spire still in our bullpen, still totally fine. Sending Waldichuk down will move Colby Allard into the specialist role against left-handed pitchers. And we'll have Sears and Ginkel as our lefty-righty middle relievers, and then Spire still as a lefty setup man. Hopefully Luzardo will pitch better going forward, because at this point he is the only lefty we have in the rotation. And with those 2 trades for Ginkel and Candelario complete, we'll see if we can win the final game of the month of July and head into August at 500, which is right where we were when we started this episode. And unfortunately, we ended up losing to Seattle yesterday, 10-1. So we will have a losing record as the month of August begins. As we sit here on August 1st, 11.5 behind in the division. And we are 5 out of the wild card spot. So on the periphery of the playoff race, feel like we've done a lot of roster churning over these last few weeks to hopefully mean that we'll have a better team for the last couple months of the season than we've had throughout the season. Taking a quick look at our team statistics, after a good start to the month of July, we ended up 500 for the month. Pythagorean expectations are that we're a 500 team, so we're basically performing in line with expectations. We have slipped to 12th in the league in runs scored. We rank 6th in the league in runs allowed. If we can get that run scored back to 9th, which is where it was just a few weeks ago, I think if we're middle of the pack in terms of our offense, with the pitching that we have and the good defense that we have, we should be able to at least be in contention headed into the final week of the season for a wild card spot. Don't know that that's a realistic aspiration, but we are going to give it our best shot, and we'll find out in our next episode if we are able to, number one, guide this team to the most successful season we've had here in this playthrough. That is not necessarily very high aspirations, since 77 wins is the best that we've done. Right now with the .490 winning percentage, we are on pace to be the best team that we've had. If we hit that goal, then certainly would like to at least get to 500. And if we get this team to 500, hey, there's got to be a team that's only a little bit over 500 in the final wildcard spot. why not have it be us in Oakland? And we'll find out if we're able to achieve any of those goals in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.